So hello, I'm Ryan Ng. I'm a visual effects supervisor at We. I am also very heavily involved in WeFX pipeline development, especially on the Houdini side. At we like to think while all other applications, other DCC can be used to make ingredients, Houdini is where all the cooking actually happens. So in our pipeline, we use Houdini extensively. Basically, once layout and models done, we bring everything into Houdini to do look dev. So from look development onwards, crowd, character effects, dynamics, lighting and rendering, everything is done in Houdini. Usually for some environment works, for complex, big environment, we utilize terrain effects, the powerful scattering tool from Houdini to create environments and then layout. So I would say Houdini definitely has allowed us to grow rapidly. As Laurence mentioned, we are a fairly new studio in Toronto. So thanks to its ease of scripting capability, scalability, ease of customization, we are allowed to, from our first few months of running, we are allowed to build our basic Houdini structure and allowed us to ship shows very quickly. So within first year, we shipped 1 feature, 3 TV series, and 2 of them we were the main vendors of the shows. And I'm sure it wouldn't have made possible without Houdini if it was other packages. So today we have our effects team here with our effects supervisor, Vimal Mallireddy, and his amazing team to talk about the work we did in one of our projects, Cabinet of Curiosities. So without further ado, Rafael, take this over.
All right, so we're talking Cabinet of Curiosities. An interesting thing is that I graduated in design, human-centered design, doing portfolio, UX, apps and stuff. And as soon as I graduated, I knew I needed to kind of go for VFX and really immerse myself. So I was lucky enough to have a chance to actually come to Canada, do a postgraduate program here for VFX. And from there, it's just kind of all Houdini for me. I made sure that throughout my course, I was studying more Houdini than any other areas, and I was lucky enough to actually land an internship at Side Effects. And from there, things just kind of worked out. I had a chance to work at Mixer Toronto. Then I went for Tangent Animation. From there, I went to Pixelmondo. And later on, 2021, Vimal was like, dude, you have to come check us out, And I did accept, join WeFX later on March 2022. And I joined to actually work on the Cabinet show. So a little bit about our team that worked on that show. We are 7 artists working for that show. Vimal, me, Darren, Mykyta, Justin, Manny, and Sisi. We all working from home. And the core team is here in Ontario, but we also have folks in Vancouver and also Indonesia. So it's a pretty diverse team, which I love it. And good thing, we all using Houdini every day, 40 hours or more. And yeah, that's a lot of fun. And as Ryan mentioned as well, our lighting team also uses Houdini, which makes it really easy sometimes because we can exchange shaders, setups, small build-ups, and it allows us to have like a really flexible pipeline. And I do believe it makes everything more streamlined and easy to work. We can always share things and even help each other when we don't know something. So it's really powerful to have everybody using the same application. So let's kind of tiptoe the outside, right? So the outside, we have this amazing character that's a Lotion Lady, then she needs to scream and walk around everywhere. And today, what I'm actually going to show right now is a video. Some of the shots is like a reel of some of the shots that we worked for that show. And everything you guys see as a Lotion is CGI, right? And I hope you guys enjoy it and have a good time. very lotiony, right? So all of that is there's a lot of CGI there, guys. And today we're gonna break the magic a little bit. So it's a big scope of shots. These are definitely we definitely worked on more shots than you guys seen tonight. But we kind of split those shots into three big groups. We had the character enhancement shots, such as the bathtub sequence and the basement sequence, where we kind of had to make her lotiony. We do have the layout enhancement shots where we need to go and drip where she was and she walked to. And we also have the hero shots, right? Those shots that are highly art directed by us and the clients. And also they have a really healthy mix of hand animation and effects tied up together tightly. So throughout all these shots, our main goal is pretty straightforward. We need to enhance the practical model, make it drip, make it look really interesting, and also keep the actor performance while still maintaining like a sexy and curvy silhouette because that's kind of the theme of the episode. And well, I brought you a really interesting image here. So on the left side, it's actually what we have on set, was captured on set. And on the right is the final delivery CGI. And initially, the job was to enhance, but we actually match and replace, what makes everything much more harder, especially because this is not like an open environment where we have a directional light. Instead, it's a basement with multiple sorts of light, really specific, and it was really challenging for the lighting team and for our effects team and for everybody on the project to actually come together and deliver this final output that does look like close, that does match really closely to the source, but has much more to tell about its story and performance. So what started as an enhancement became match and replace. And what we're gonna dive in tonight is the basement sequence where our main actor has some really intimate moment with that monster and kind of gets to know it better. So where do we start? We start with the scan and sculpting and the asset team. So what you guys see on the left is the processing of the scan that we got from the actor on set. And as soon as that hit the ground, our asset team and look dev team did an amazing job to start working with the actual textures and look and feel for that character so we can convey that is made out of lotion, right? And that when that's done, it's handed over to FX and it's time for fun. These are some of our early tests, and we are using a flip solver to make this lotion run over the body of the character and occasionally drip. But at this point, we don't have much control of where it drips, how it drips. It's just kind of there is those drips and designs, they're all FX made. And that's kind of a challenge because if FX has to do all the drips for different shots, it becomes like something that takes a lot of iterations to get it right, especially because the client might not like, the client might have opinions. So it makes like a process with a lot of iterations. And also it was really hard to tell when to drip and how to drip. And we kind of felt that we wouldn't be able to get that output from one simulation. So we had to kind of come around and figure a solution. Later on, we got the animation, right? So that's kind of when things kind of get even funnier because we have all this liquid motion happening, but we also need to make that liquid motion conform to the actual character animation. So sometimes it became really hard to, we either would get too much motion or the particles would fall too much, the animation, or too little. So it was kind of really hard and challenging to deal with that. And from that assessment and early tests, we're kind of able to lay out some key challenges for our development. Define the look of the lotion that matches the client expectations, one of them. Define how we can actually decide when it drips, how long it drips, and add drips as required by our clients. And also be able to control in our direction the flow of the lotion, right? Because she's on different positions. We need to make it go on the correct direction. So how do we approach that? And the last one is make all of that work with the actual simulation and animation, right? So it's a big problem. It's a complex VFX problem. So when we kind of had the early test in a good position, we noticed that our modeling team, our asset team, they had a really amazing base mesh at that point, right? They hand sculpted and detailed all those drips and made this model that the client was really happy with it. So we wondered in our effects team, how could we leverage those model drips into our site, right? How can we make that interactive and into our advantage? And usually when you work in the studio, you guys are going to be able to see that we usually have one model that renders and one model that's used for animation. So in our case, we have the level 3 model, high detail, high mesh, the rendering model, right? And then we have on the left a model that's slightly skinnier and also thinner a little bit, and it doesn't have all that detail. So we imagine what happens if we overlap those two, and what would be the ideal way to overlap those two meshes. And we found comfort on the VDB toolset for that. And we are able to actually convert those two meshes into VDB, overlap them, and able to extract our amazing drips that the asset team built in our advantage. And this system works so well that we also were able to kind of grab some drips from different parts of the body and place there where needed. And this is kind of how it looks in Houdini. It's kind of straightforward. Basically, we just subdivide the mesh, making sure that we have all the round edges that it can have. Then we convert to a really high resolution VDB, and we do the VDB combined with the subtract operation, and that allows us to extract that information that we actually need. Then we cache and convert to points later on. So the challenge to define the look of it, our solution was given by our asset department. And that also was a really interesting because we were able to use those extract drips also as the source of our simulation. Next, we need to control when it drips and for how long, right? And for that, we went, okay, we're gonna separate everything, right? And let's make the body flow one simulation, one setup, and let's get the drips, another simulation, another setup. Especially because the body was kind of easy to, in three iterations, we're able to kind of get in a good point. As of the dripping part, it actually so much more prone to iterations because the client wants to add some, our supervisor wants to add some, I might want to add some as well, just to make it look cool. But later we need to add, remove. So that process, separating those two steps, make it really easy for us to decide and control that setup. And here, what you guys see on the green side is just the mesh of the character with a pink drop. So that has its own simulation set up. On the left side, the pink one is actually the base mesh of the character overlap with that glowing lotion or flowing lotion. So separating those two made it really efficient for us, hit really fast the flowing lotion, and then keep iterating on the drips as it needed, right? So was our lives just a little bit easier, right? Next, we talk about how to control and direct that flow. And for that, we leverage all the amazing attributes that Flip can ingest. Definitely relying a lot under density, temperature, and viscosity, but also we're using normals and velocity, particle velocity, to actually drive our simulations. How does that work? Basically, after we grab the sculpted drips, we apply different maps or add a noise, right? And those noise will drive some initial viscosity, initial density, and initial temperature for the character. This is how our simulation setup kind of looked, our DOP-net. Basically, we input that on the first frame. We collide that mesh, that particle set with a collision object. And then we do have two special nodes there. We have an adhesive model, and also we have a subsolver there. That's kind of the most different thing on this setup. Adhesive model, we're just kind of grabbing whatever velocity the particles have, looking at the normals of the character, and using those normals to kind of keep sure that the points are just flowing on the character mesh. So kind of straightforward there. But for whatever is dripping, we are usually looking at the actual speed of the particles, and based on that speed, we will wrangle out. You should have more density or less density, and that gives us some curling and some nice action for the flowing lotion. Interesting fact, something I didn't know before I started this project, there is also this flip field and stick field that are control fields like in the Pyro network that we can actually use, basically create a point attribute called sticky, convert that to a volume, and you can feed that volume into the solver, and it will allow us to also direct how much it should flow on the body and the direction it should flow. So if you guys haven't tested this part out, you guys definitely should check it out on the Flip documentation. So the next one is, the challenge is actually how are we gonna deal with the animation on this project, right? So we had a couple ideas, and again, we're extracting the drips, then we are posing the character on the given frame. So this simulation for the full body was kind of costly. It would take some good time on the farm, but we don't need to simulate things we don't see on the screen, guys. So it's really important for us to actually reduce the actual point count before going to the simulation. So basically, we would kind of, for each shot, paint where we need those points, where we don't need, and just send to the simulation all that's exclusively needed to achieve that goal on that shot. And you're seeing here on this image here on the right, just like some points, and where it's red, we don't have any points because it's not seen by the camera. And these are some of the outputs that we got from it, right? So the lotion is flowing, we can control where it goes, it has some nice flow. We then can kind of retime this cache, which is amazing. So for this one, it's actually a bit faster, but for the show ones, we definitely put a stopper there. It's much slower, much subtle, because the whole scene does call for something more calmer and progressive. So it's good, it's really good to actually have this option to do one simulation, then do something entirely new and different with the cache, right? Interpret in a different way, change the velocity. So that's kind of what we did for that show. And it kind of felt like we had it all figured out because we were doing the simulation, we could control it. We were doing that in a single frame. So basically we were kind of, okay, all right, we extract the dips, pose the character, do the simulation on a single frame. It's an interesting frame, the flow will be correct. And then after that, what we need to do, let's just deform the points and then mesh, right? So grab all the caches from the simulation, use the point deformer to mesh the animation itself, and then just mesh it. Easy, right? Not so much. You guys can look at the reflections on the head. You guys will see that they flick quite a lot, right? It's not working. The client doesn't like that. So how to deal with that? So it was like troubleshoot time, right? So we need to kind of sit back, grab a coffee, and just like, okay, guys, what's happening here? Who's the responsible for that stuff? So our approach was like, we go top to bottom, try to find different areas of the setup and render each one of them. Like, render a couple frames, see what's up. Do they flick? They don't flick? They don't flick? Okay, cool. And then at one point, we kind of, all right, so we are converted to, we deforming the animation, we deforming the point cloud of the simulation to the animation and then converting to mesh. What happens if we actually swap that order, right? What happens if we actually, on that freezing frame, do all the meshing, apply all we need, and then we just deform the mesh? What happens when they do that? So again, on the left is the flickery one, and on the right, we got a much cleaner output from doing that change. So we were like, that kind of an eureka moment. And we were happy that we were able to do the drooling and kind of get some really nice highlights, because this Lotion Lady is all about highlights. All the detail of the lights are there. So it was really crucial for us to get it right. And for me, this is like one of the perfect examples to talk about why Houdini, guys, and why you guys should be learning and why you should be using for handling complex VFX shots. Basically, as an artist, I feel like I'm playing with a Lego set or something that's like building blocks. I'm able to build something. I don't like, I break apart, rebuild, I talk with someone, we all sit together, we all look at the same problem and say, what is this ugly thing happening here? So we can collectively, find a solution. We can enjoy the non-destructive approach. We can look at a node network that kind of describes our thoughts and process for achieving that specific thing. And then we can kind of mash it up and change. So I do feel that Houdini is the tool for complex VFX shots, right? So that's kind of how we solved the last challenge for this one, right? So instead of actually deforming and then meshing, we're meshing and then deforming. It's an interesting detail, but it really saved our lives. And once that's done, we have multiple artists working on the show. How do we get that update to all the other people working on the show? Luckily, Ryan made an awesome tool for us. We call WeFX airdrop. Basically, we select the nodes that we need to deploy to other artists, and we just kind of find the artist on an index list and send to that artist. So as soon as we figure out the issue, it's really easy for us to deploy to other artists any type of asset or updates we have in our setups. And that's also really good because we have a gallery. So whatever thing that we develop or like, we kind of just save in that gallery. And then if someone needs, we just say, hey guy, go to my gallery, grab that stuff. We need that viscosity model. It's there. Make use of it. And we're just gonna kind of now take a look on what became our shot pipeline, right? And I'm just gonna play this video real quick so you guys can see the Houdini side of things. There is our two meshes, our simple level 1 mesh and our level 3 mesh kind of overlapped. From there, we use the VDB operations to extract it. Once we get the VDB, we grab our base animation, paint some masks, and define exactly where we want, where we don't need, and then we move that, transfer that to points, and so on. We also added a little bit more. Sometimes we need a little bit more on the head, or the shoulder, or something. So that type, when we actually all have points, we can just keep adding more points for achieve what we need. Add some attributes. Let's go. Multiply the attributes, play a little bit, and then once that's done, we go to the drip simulation, completely different setup, made just for dripping and making some nicely interesting shapes out of it. We grab that data, run a couple simulations, as many as the client wants and our team wants, and we actually just, go for the meshing part. So here we actually have our meshing and that trick of blurring normals. So if you guys don't know, you can always blur your normals to get a smoother look on your renders. That's usually done for blood, but also was really handy for the lotion. So that's the change, like enable, get like harder shapes, and then we enable it. You just kind of get smoother shapes, right? So from there, we point deform it, so it conforms to the actual animation that we have for that scene. And we then bring all the drips together, do our final meshing for the character, so it all looks like one unified lotion. And then it's just kind of about, writing some attributes to it, like UV, PureFs, or other things that might be necessary for the other teams. And at the end, you guys can see here kind of the different attributes we have. The PureF attribute, masks for arms or other parts of the body. And I think I do have an image here. That's kind of what our lighting team had in hands. They also had viscosity here, but you have the PureF map, only the drips, the flowing drips on the body, and the base mesh of the character. So all of that's separated and allows for the lighting team to really take advantage of that and take the look to the next level, okay? I'm not joking next level. Like, I'm really proud of the work of the lighting team. Thank you so much, PC. You're amazing. And you guys can see here we have some really interesting noise patterns happening, right? All the capture of the light, the silhouette, some areas are brighter than the others. It's just kind of, the light side of things is amazing. It's beautiful. So this is also the lighting contact sheet that we have for the comp team. So the comp team would leverage all these different passes to actually make their magic. More on the lighting sides, right? We render with Arnold. We do use PRF and UVs to kind of control that noise and the flow. Each single shot does need some tweaking on the shader side so it can actually have the proper look. And if you guys are more interested in getting to know the inside of the lighting side, later this year, our character look dev lead will actually do a really cool talk on WeFX Café Montreal this year. Yet to be announced the date, so keep an eye out for that. And once we kind of figure out the shot pipeline, is just work, right? We have a lot of shots to deliver, and it was time to grind. So that's pretty much it for the Lotion Lady talk. And thank you so much. And now I'm opening for Q&A if anyone has a question. You have a question? Yeah.
So initially when I saw the reference versus the sort of the final output, like the specular seemed a little sort of more diffuse. I'm wondering whether that was because of the normal averaging, whether it was like the subsurface scattering on the wax, or or the lotion, or like was the combination of the two. So kind of curious what kind of led to that.
It might also be just the projector, right? The quality of the image that we have here, but the team did really make sure that we were matching the lighting as close as we want. And we had not only us, but like the client also validating the light, right? So we really strive to actually make it as close as possible for that look. Cool. All right, anyone else want to have a question? We good? Awesome, so we are just stopping for you guys grab a drink, go to the washroom, and as soon as like 5-10 minutes, we're gonna come back and actually take a look, hand it over to Mykyta, and we will talk about the dreams of the witch house. Thank you so much, guys.
Let's start. Thank you, Rafael, for a great presentation. Thanks for introducing our whole team and myself. And I just want to say that I'm really happy to be here. I'm really happy to present in TUG. I've never thought that I'm going to be presenting like this, and it's like first time, and I'm super excited. So my name is my name is Mykyta. I'm coming from Ukraine. I came to Canada 2 years ago to study visual effects, and previously I worked as a 3D modeler and texturing artist. But when I was studying here at the college, I was like, 3D modeling is kind of boring for me right now, and I'm just gonna try Houdini a little bit. And after I tried it, I kind of like it's crazy software. Like some time passed like back and forth because it's like I need to try it, like super crazy. And then I realized it's like the best thing in our world right now, in the VFX world, and I just fell in love with it. And immediately after graduation, I went to VFX as junior effects artist, and now I'm VFX working on the cool projects, and this is the cool project that I'm gonna go and talk right now about it. It's 6th episode of Cabinet of Curiosities, and we're talking Keziah. So this is the disintegration of this character that we made. This character is scanned to mimic the real life look. We created a high detailed hero asset that contained 3 million points as a maximum subdivision. After fractioning, it contained 5.5 million points. And also it got 30 UDIMs. For those who don't know, it's how you measure texturing space. So it was really high detailed, and we needed to fracture it properly and maintain all the UVs and all the attributes to make it look good after we pass it to lighting and render it after disintegration and destruction. So here we can see the turntable. This is how the final model looked like, with textures and shaders applied. And also on the corners of the screen, we can see like a preview of data that we used to recreate this look, the real look of costume of actress. And this is the head of Keziah. The head contained the most of the detail because it was really important, as it's like the beginning of the whole destruction, and it's in the first shot. So we really made sure to make it as high detail as possible. So the main goal for FX was to tell the story of Keziah's death by disintegrating her from the impact of dagger, which splits all her body apart while crumbling and dissolving her brittle dry roots into thin air. After determining the main goal, we derived tasks for our effects team. The first was body RBD simulation. The second was simulation of inner pieces that she was made of. Then we did cloth simulation. Then we did simulation for a hat that she had. Also dust and smoke to tie every effect together. And also the ambers, smokes, and sparks, which arise from the impact of the dagger when she pulls it out. We can again see the sequence. Yeah, so to start with the effects, we started with animation. Once the asset was created, the animation department made sure that everything is prepared for effects to start the process. So this is how the animation that we received looked like. We can see here animation provided us with her splitting head. So the artist of effects can utilize this movement and drive their simulation for destruction. And jumping into fracturing, each part has had a different fracture. We split the whole asset into a couple parts: the head, chest, lower body, and layers of claws. Head was the most important, as we try to mimic the detail, the wooden look of these branches that consisted Keziah. So we made elongated shapes that resemble the look of wooden planks, so it looks more realistic as it's made out of wood. And to achieve this goal, we used Houdini and Boolean tools, and also we used the multi-layer fracture system, which allowed us to greatly vary the size of pieces and achieve more variation in terms of size of different chunks that she's made of. Here we can see up close the head. This is the long pieces that I was talking about. They look like splitters, wood splitters, all over her head. And jumping to the biggest challenge that our team faced is the creation of uniform, universal growth solver, which meant that the moment she pulls out the dagger from her head, pieces start fall out from that point and spread the activation throughout her head and body. So we made sure we create highly flexible, art-directable solver, and the main task for it was that the spread of activation attributes should affect only certain parts of the body, and also it should maintain certain speed so it looks good in the shot. And the solver was is based on point clouds, and the density of points ultimately determines how fast the growth of the attribute happens. And also it's highly flexible. For example, here you can see this is front, this is back. Front means that we separated the mesh onto two parts. In front, the attribute grows with certain speed. On the back, it grows a little bit slower. So we can add wrangle even here, for example, for her arm, and the arm will inhibit different behavior. So it was highly flexible and fast and reusable. We only use VEX code and attribute wrangles inside the solver, which make it like multi-threaded, and it's super, super fast, and it's reusable. So we use it on all geometries across all the shots that we worked on. We use it for class. We use it as a source for particle smoke emissions. Here we can see how the growth is growth. And here it also grows, but on pre-fractured geo. We can see here that growth affects the center part of her body, because it shouldn't go to the hands, because the hands will float in the air, because everything is going to be destroyed where the white is. So we made sure it just goes in the center, and the hands are kept on the shoulders, not floating in the air. Jumping onto her insides, we created procedural model inside of Houdini using find shortest path tool, and we just defined start and end points, connected them, and did some pre-processing, and we achieved this type of look of inner branches that she's made of. And to fracture it, first we used point deform to stretch it. We use point deform to stretch the whole insides by using the original animation. So first the inner branches are being stretched, and then there is a threshold which defines the pieces that are falling out. If the stress is too much, if they stretch too much, basically they fall down. So that's our system. And also the growth solver also overrides the activation of those pieces. Also, a really interesting challenge for our team was to make sure that simulations look consistent throughout all the shots. It meant that in the beginning of each shot, it's a continuation of the previous shot, but with slight delay. So our animation department provided us with a pre-roll. Basically, as we can see here, the pre-roll this is the pre-roll. The template geo is the first frame of our shot. And the pre-roll mimics how the previous shot, the ending of the previous shot looked like. So we have already some particles and pieces falling, but when the shot begins, they're already there. That's the magic of pre-roll. And next challenge was creating claws. And for some pieces of claws, it was a straightforward process. It's just Vellum simulation with collision geo. But for some, we needed to find a workaround because we used the original animation geo as a collision of, for example, these dry roots. They was used as a collision, but it didn't work in the end because it was too heavy. And we faced ourselves with a lot of penetrations and a lot of intersections, which just produced a lot of artifacts and didn't work in the end. So we found a workaround. We used the original animation of the claws, and we used it as a collision. So we just made a slight offset, and we used the same claws as a collision to drive the simulated claws. This way, we achieved realism, and it behaves nicely on the wind, but it also maintains the shape that animation provided us with. And here we can see the comparison. The first test is animation of the simulation of the claws with branches as a collision object, and here we test out with our custom collision object made from the same claws. And the final thing that I want to show you is dust and smoke, which ties all the effects together and produce this nice dusty effect. As we can see here, it's just one of our test renders of everything assembled. Here, jumping more in detail, we are jumping in the POP solver, in the POP network. As we can see here, we have particles advected by smoke. So particles initially they're sourced from the falling pieces and also sourced from the activation attribute from the universal growth solver that I talked about. And then they get affected by the velocity of the smoke using the pop advect by volumes. And the smoke, it's sourced only based on the velocity and acceleration of the falling pieces. So the pieces that fall faster, they will produce more smoke initially. So the interesting thing that I want to talk about is pop collision detect that we see here. It has a little open lock, which means that Houdini has this asset locked, and it's like prepared for every artist to use. But if we want to dive in and edit something inside of this asset, we are free to do so, and that's why I love Houdini. We just jump in the pop collision detect, and so we can see here in the next slide, we see particles falling, and we see some red particles just stick on the ground, and that was one of the creative nodes that needed to be hit. So what we used is to go into pop collision detect and created this small addition, which meant that there was a random value on each particle, and the noise would compare this value to itself, and some particles that are lower than the noise would be stuck on the ground, and some particles will fly off. And that's what is really good about Houdini. You can just use the prepared tool ready to use, but you can just edit it as much as you want after that. And yeah, this was the last thing I wanted to show you. And let's just look again how it looked in the end. basically, this is the approach we use to achieve this kind of effect, and we definitely learned something new. And Houdini once again proved itself to be irreplaceable tool for tackling tasks like this. So thank you so much for coming, and it was a pleasure talking. I hope you learned something from this. Cool. That's it for me. Any questions? I would definitely answer them.
So I was kind of curious. Did gravity or buoyancy, or either one or both, factor into the sort of the pieces of cloth that were kind of flying and landing on the floor?
Yeah, there were both determining factor, but we used mainly mass to drive the whole behavior, because mass affects, like you can make pieces of cloth move slowly or faster depending on mass. So we just used that, and we also used the drag and the like pop force to make influence on the cloth. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? Sure.
I personally kind of like the bouncy feeling on the Witch's lips when she was falling apart into two
The
pieces.
first shot.
Yeah, on the previous. I think it was on the previous.
On the flip book, right?
Yes. Uh-huh. And yeah, I wondered if it was if it's done by an animation or VFX.
Yeah, it was animation.
Oh, that's cool. Thank you.
Yeah, our animation department is amazing.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? Everything's super clear. Not clear. Here you go.
Yeah, universal growth solver. Use point clouds. What are the benefits of using point clouds instead of points directly?
What do you mean points directly? It can be used in a VoP network. It also can be used in the solver. But because we had to make sure like the distance between points actually plays the role and affects the speed, that's why we use the solver and the point cloud inside of Wrangles.
Yeah, but for point cloud, you mean like you used point cloud open, point cloud?
Yeah, the whole point cloud functions we used in the Wrangles. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other unclear people? I think we're good, right? Oh, one more. Super unclear.
So yeah, I was just wondering. So for the character disintegration, so for the modelization, was it difficult to adapt the modelization for this kind of effect? So is it something you think about before, or
Or modeling, you mean?
yeah, yeah?
Yeah, so we had concepts, and we also had real on-set Keziah, the actor with the costume, and it got photographed and scanned completely, as we could see on, like, let me just roll back. Oh, here, so we can see here are the scans that we were provided before VFX production began, and we have like tons of these images, and we model and texture based on these images. We actually use these images as a texture. We just projected some of those images, so painted out, maybe color corrected, but these images were crucial to creating model. That's why it looks as realistic as the real Keziah. No problem. Any questions?
So, how did you texture the in-between parts that you generated so that it's like it feels continuous with the original model?
It's a great question. You mean like the depth, like the parts, like inside of the parts?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So again, we used the same data, but it was projected in various ways. So basically, for example, we need to texture inside roots, right? We use this image, but we manipulate it. We're like scaling it down so it matches the geometry, and then we will have the asset that we need, and it will look actually very realistic because we have realistic data from scans. Any questions? Oh, second round.
Internal parts. You said you used the short path, and what did you use for start points and end points? Is it like top to bottom or bottom to top or something more intricate?
Actually, I'm not 100% sure what was used on that, but we definitely scattered some points on the geometry, and then we randomly selected some points on it. And these random points were start points, and also we selected ending points that are closer to the inside part of her. So that's why these roots connect from the outer part to the inside part. And there are a lot of connection, and this is what ultimately makes the branches look like.
Outside to inside.
Yeah.
Looked cool.
Cool. Second round, one more? No. I think we're done. Thanks everybody, and I'm really enjoyed talking today. Yeah, no problem.